Hi, Alimma, how are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm well, thank you very much.
Okay, good to hear that. And, you know, sorry if there's any unavoidable background noise. All the doors are closed here, but there seems to be a neighbor's pet barking. Yeah. Okay, welcome everybody. Uh, Lovely to have this. Second Insta Live of the year, the new year 2025, with uh, Alimma. They are trans non-binary artist and workshop facilitator and Vajrayana Buddhism student based in the UK, but they're originally from Central Asia. Okay, and we're very honored to have her here. I may by mistake have said her, for your pronoun. Sorry, you use they and her, right?
Yeah, I use they, them, and she,
Yeah.
her equally.
Okay, cool. Then fine. All right. Okay, and I will quickly introduce, of course, there will be first time joinees, there'll be people who will watch this sometimes even a few weeks later. Of course, there are closed captions available for people with any hearing challenges. And of course, for people who have any visibility and rather sight issues, again, audio will be there. And so for over a year and a half now, we at RANG, Pan India Intersectional Queer Grassroots Collective, we are unfunded, have been hosting these Insta Lives along with two other grassroots unfunded collectives. One is Nestam Sojesk. They work in a particular state, the southwestern state of Andhra, and rather more south central. Okay, and they also have been founded by uh, intersectional queer trans folks. They work on various, healthcare referrals and offline events with the queer trans community, and in also smaller towns where English isn't spoken much. And also they do this very challenging thing, task of reaching out to school students, talking about gender and sexual diversity. We know that as much as children may discontinue or never join school and have various issues, even institutional education is also, I think, worldwide, it's very controlled, and it's just worsening in so many places. Okay, and gender and sexuality is normal and natural, I mean, in the diversity especially, but obviously people want to, adults sometimes want to gatekeep those discussions. So that's also a reason why we have these, first person lives, which are uh, sometimes multilingual, and they are actually, we have free flowing conversations, but we have been very encouraged all the time by the very great feedback that we get from people, that uh, they this is what we need, narratives of people who are doing wonderful work like you, Alimma, very quietly actually. Right. Just before I, further this conversation, I just wanted to tell people that Alimma and I, like so many people we have hosted Insta Lives with, met online, of course. We sit or live hundreds or thousands of kilometers or miles apart. But Alimma was in an online queer Buddhist conference where another queer person from India and I were doing a presentation on, a similar thing, like, beyond binaries, but binaries need not be only in gender, sexuality, or anything, right? And me being a gender fluid person, yeah, I think, so many things in life are also fluid, yeah, including the way the rainbow appears and disappears, right? It just merges with the sky, the firmament, whatever we call it. So, Alima, uh, the multiple interesting aspects of you, okay, but maybe a very cliched question, okay. Uh, how has life been after, of course, I think you migrated, right? Plus, also, being open and out about your gender, and of course, also discovering things along the way, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for your introduction. I'm really glad that we get to have this conversation today. And also, I just found it so beautiful what you said about, that a lot of life's qualities are beyond the binary. I think that's a very core tenet of my beliefs and the way that I try to approach the world. So I'm really glad you said that. It's a beautiful analogy also with the rainbow, and I think that's why it's a great symbol for for the queer movement. But I appreciate, your first question. I think there is not a straightforward answer like this. It's also very filled with contradictory things. But I immigrated from my home country into the UK at a very young age. So it was quite a strong culture shock for me. My English was not so well formed. And so quite immediately I started to realize how power and access to kind of passing within a culture works, because here I'd say if you are a immigrant, you are held to certain standards of passing according to British protocol. And I think that's a culture that of course has been forcefully exported on a global scale through colonialism as well. So I feel like it's still present, of course, in the way that power works, but also socially, like within this country as well. And so there was a very fast pressure to adjust the way that I behave and present in order to fit more with the expectations here. And I feel like when I was entering my teenage years and kind of realizing more about my queerness and being more open about being both queer in terms of gender and sexuality, I also realized that this was a something that if being an immigrant sets you apart, this sets you apart in a secondary way, and so you're kind of on both sides, not fitting in, and I was lucky that I was, from a very young age, attracted to the arts and had people around me, both peers and teachers at school, and other influences even in my family, who are in that path of like artistic expression. Because I think in general for children, it's so important to find a space where they can express themselves and be more embodied and be more themselves. And for me, that was within the arts, where there was kind of that opportunity to be like, it's okay to stand out. It's okay not to fit the cultural norms, because it means you have a point of view and you can kind of express it within that artistic space. And I think other people that I encountered, especially adults, were also there because they felt somehow different culturally or in terms of their personality. So they had a whole lot of compassion for where I was at, and helped me along the way with that quite a lot. I'd say. I don't know. Have you found a similar experience in terms of that, in terms of those early childhood formative years?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Yes, this actually, I mean, I'm 51. So many things you said in these initial comments, right, or reply. Okay. Well, I I think I believe I realized my gender and sexuality, the fluidity of it, or in my preteens, but minimal. What minimal? No vocabulary, no community, as in like you and perhaps people here who've joined know that um, India or South Asia, let me say, because India, what it is now, was as in geopolitically, it's been there only from 1947. But this whole region has had indigenous, queer, trans, two spirit. I mean, we don't call it two spirit per se, but again, there are so many of our local languages, some which are were lost, some which are diminishing sadly. But anyway, for like, I don't know, millennia, maybe we a queer friend and I said a couple of years ago at an anthropology come theology come ecology conference that when did queer trans people, when did gender and sexually diverse people appear on earth? Well, when other humans appeared, we've been there forever. Maybe it was never documented. Maybe that documentation was lost, destroyed, not translated, misinterpreted, and stuff. Either way, yeah. So, which is also the reason that despite all these, local cultures, subcultures, communities, there was very little connect, right, especially as a child for me. But very beautifully, the hijras, who many people across the world, especially queer trans folks, have heard of, had apparently celebrated and blessed me a few days into my infancy, or sorry, a few days into my birth, because that again is a very organic thing. Like for some, I mean, nowadays maybe, or at some times earlier, people used to invite, local hijdas and other even more local indigenous queer trans communities, for their blessings and for celebration and for their, very specific musical and dance performances. But that was also only if you could, maybe if you had a certain social standing and could, really compensate them richly. So my biological family could never afford that. But since I was born in Hyderabad, so they got to know of it that a child is born, and they came and danced and all that. So that is something which I really hold very closely to my heart. And my mom told me about that much later. I mean, it just never arose in the conversation. Plus, also, I grew up in Chennai, which also has its own uh, queer trans communities, but things were quite different. I'm 73 born, 1973 born. So, yeah. So, as you say again, and thanks for also disclosing your struggles with language. Actually, even in South Asia, India, knowing English, being urban raised, is a big privilege and advantage. Yeah, irrespective of your caste and class, and of course gender and sexuality. But of course, each so-called marginalized, I'm saying so-called because some part of me is supposed to be privileged, but that didn't help in some ways. It helped in some other ways. But yeah, but each marginalization sets you back that much more or that much further. And I also have invisible disabilities. I'm neurodivergent, queer, yeah, and uh, asexual, which is also highly misunderstood within the community, right? I mean, within the queer trans community, right? So with all this, wasn't easy at all. And also, self acceptance is such a long and tough and despite everything, it is a very lonely journey, right? So that was another thing. And I must admit, I wasn't so much into the arts in the traditional way because also, life teaches you along the way that it's not just the binariness, the boundaries of art, right? This is art. This is how it's supposed to be. It has to be beautiful, symmetric, whatever, right? I mean, like I'm just recalling. Sorry, I know this is a long response, but I thought this should also trigger the conversation further. Um, as an adult, I worked in the corporate space, so there things are more dehumanized. Okay, but there were periodically we used to have maybe 1 hour sessions. I won't even say periodically, maybe rarely by one person. But again, that thing did not continue because I changed the organization. Plus, also, every organization has its own way of doing or undoing or not doing some kind of, what do you call, not just fun activities, but where you connect with yourself. So, long story short, this person was who themselves had been in the corporate, I think, advertising industry. So they came. I'm from IT. I studied computer science and engineering. So this person was talking, told us, take some, gave paper and then put, I think, crayons and color pencils and said, please draw some square or something, but color it like a child. Okay. So, I think I took that as a cue and then colored happily outside the square. Okay. Square or circle or whatever. And this person went around the table and took my paper. I was like, I'm not even done. They were like, no, yeah. And after a point, I think among 20, 25 people, maybe even more, they will held these up and said, see, that's what, somebody took that message of coloring like a child. And that is the thing, right? Sometimes we create those boundaries. We say the teacher told us this, or our parent, or some other person, but or maybe we are socialized or somewhere conditioning ourselves that this is how things should be. But sometimes, let loose, right? Give yourself some freedom, okay? And don't yeah, so I think that's a yeah, square by omission of color is still a square. Thanks for saying that. Right. Yeah, and so I think that is something which I have held closely. Also, I tell people sometimes, at least friends, let us not lose the child within ourselves. Yeah, but I know, sorry, I have digressed. But again, this is the fluidity or organic nature of conversations, right? So yeah, I hope I've answered your question, Alima. But also, I would like to know more, and I'm sure all of us here would like to know more about uh, what led you to art, and you said a little bit about how it has helped you, but love to hear more about that.
Thank you so much. First of all, that was a really beautiful answer. I could really see everything you were describing so vividly. It's amazing to hear about your childhood stories. Of course, we grew up in quite different contexts, so I think it's important for me to to hear this, and it's so generous of you to share because I really appreciate your experience. And I also really liked your story about coloring outside of the square. I think that's so important and something that I genuinely believe, just like, that queerness being a natural human faculty that is probably accessible to everybody, but has definitely been there throughout all of history. Um, I think creative expression is also like, it's very strange how restricted this is. And it's probably because, it's one of those very embodied practices that connect us to something beautiful and empowering and liberating. And so, of course, they don't let everyone have this with the way that society is set up. But I think it's an important role, and it's just one of those human things to be able to draw or sing or play music or dance. I think that's why it's so present in every culture across these rituals and things that we have that we pass down. But yeah, that this idea that it's only acceptable if it's done a certain way, and if it looks according to rules or otherwise you're not an artist, it's absolutely ridiculous. So I'm glad that you brought it up because when I talk about art, I think that's the ground from which I always want to start, that this is like a fundamental way of communicating that's just as valid as any other form, rather than some kind of skill or a trade. Of course, it can be both of those things, but why do we have art that stretches back before written language? I think it's because it was that way that people could really get messages across to each other, even when living in caves. So I'm I'm very inspired by that side of the history and version of art that's outside the very classical academic history that we've been taught, which is also so Eurocentric and prizes certain types of art over the millions versions that with folk art and kind of tradition art and all of these artists who we have across the world whose names we don't know because that's not how the culture interacted with it, but the sculptors and the painters and writers who and text and built all kinds of beautiful monuments across the world, that's equally prized, and connects us to a much larger history. And also, like, where we find, I think, a lot of representations of queerness, because when queerness, I feel like, is one of those issues that is always kind of in the process of being uncovered and reburied by the forces in power. So it's this strange sense that a lot of scholars have talked about like always being new or always being discovered, but actually it's never new and always known about. And so, yeah, when things are obscured like that, it mostly comes for the written word and things like that. But I think in a lot of ancient art, we see depictions of deities who are non-binary, who have mixed sexual characteristics, who might represent intersex people, and I think that's so important that exists, that it's solid, solid proof and representation of this.
Yeah, fantastic. Actually, and I'm extra glad you mentioned intersex people because they, are so pathologized and misrepresented, and I have been associated with them close, yeah, and from a couple of other countries for the last 8 years. I've written about them. We've together founded an India-wide support network, and so it's a closed group because the kind of stigma, you know, but this unfortunately is for all LGBTQIA plus people. Yeah, And it is tragic because, what kind of advancement or development, do these countries claim? Yeah, the Europe, US, UK, and, of course, whatever, Australia, New Zealand, whichever, all these so-called global north countries. It's funny because Australia and New Zealand are actually in the south, but anyway. But finally, uh, I sometimes believe, or more and more, actually, not sometimes, actually, almost always nowadays, that it's all their insecurity which wants everybody to be like them, whoever that them is. Yeah. Plus, also that on one side, I mean, they believe that, oh, they're restoring democracy, teaching us human rights, and we, unfortunately, especially having been colonized, by largely by the English. I would refuse to say British because the Scots were never here and then did not trouble us, and they still don't. And I'm glad they trouble the English. Okay, I mean, of course, the ones who should be troubled, not all. But yeah, uh, uh, this whole thing of the burden of all these colonial laws, and yeah, and now we say decolonization, but again, somebody decides, how much we can decolonize, how to decolonize, right? And also, that is why sometimes I am very grateful and appreciative, like you very rightly and importantly said, all the unknown arts, unknown artists, right? I mean, I'm a writer, so, but it took me quite some time to start realizing that words and are also creative expression and an art form. Okay, and the sculptors, the painters, the whatever material they used, they did it because they wanted to express and they loved that. And yes, of course, perhaps they were compensated for it, which is fair enough because it's also lots of work and probably their livelihood, but never ever sought any kind of recognition or fame. And sometimes I think even if they did, unfortunately, all the people who commissioned them took all the credit, right? Yeah, we have to, say that because whether it is often it's the places of worship, right? So many of these cathedrals and temples and which have such intricate, I mean, like almost everlasting, paintings and sculptures, provided the vagaries of the weather haven't spoiled them, which also, we have to blame ourselves for the humans for climate change. So anyway, so all I'm saying is that, of course, over time, because of looting, plundering, flood and fire, things get destroyed. But I think that unknown, unnamed artist, artisan, craftsperson has deserves lots of not just credit, but actually admiration and respect. That and in broad ways, actually, I also I'm taking a cue from what you said. Many of us, you know uh, queer trans people do not need, are not seeking limelight recognition, yeah, for being who we are or doing what we do, right? Yes, it's nice to end thing conversations. I mean, yes, it's nice to celebrate our diversity. It is vital. But also immense respect and love and strength to people who are not open about certain things about them, their identities, okay? And this whole thing about being out, you know, again is something thrust on us. Like a few weeks ago, one of the our Insta Live guests and friend said, we are queer trans in relation to the straight people, maybe suspect people, right? But we claim or don't claim it. That is our wish, our choice, our right. Okay. So, and whether we disclose it, how, when, to whom, how much, again, is completely ours. And yeah, I mean, suddenly I might stop. Suddenly I may not want to discuss, right? So, in a broad way, it reminds me of, uh, s- some of these artists or writers. I mean, the artists of all kinds, or even the inventors or whoever whose credit was given much after they were dead and gone, and and at that time, like, people make somebody wants to hold that. We don't even know if they had descendants, right? And family, and descendant of the legacy could be anybody. But again, and the way the whole thing is capitalized, right? All these auctions of art, yeah, they are like, for me, attaching a price tag, yes, if it is compensation in a kind of a reward recognition for the person who's produced it, great, wonderful. But again, that becomes a competitive thing, right? And somewhere it is almost, actually, even if it's a few $1 million, yeah, or pounds, or whichever currency, right? uh, so does it mean that you know anything above is, it's not worth attaching a greater figure to it, and anything below that also in comparison is worthless, or it is worth? So who is someone else to decide, right? And they're doing it because it's giving them some prestige. Maybe they're even what they call art aficionados, whatever. Even them, oh, I own it. Yeah, I mean, what even is this?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's very funny how these things come and change the nature of what expression means. I feel like patronage was one form of power. Now this kind of like business and auction house is a different form of power, and it really mediates what expression is geared towards and what's rewarded and what's seen as valuable. And of course, it capitalizes on that idea of branding yourself as an individual, as a kind of person with original product that is somehow set apart from the context that produces it. But it's such a interestingly fictitious idea, because of course we are aware with these kind of like crafts tradition that exists across the world, where the idea of originality is not what's highlighted. It's more about like refinement or following a certain tradition with innovation, but basically making it relevant to the people and making it something that the largest amount of people can receive the appropriate information, message, or like spiritual connection from. And I think that's a a place that's quite hard to find within like kind of the way that the market is set up. Maybe this is more like how contemporary museums try to work with artists, but yeah, nowhere is perfect, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. That's there. That's what I'm saying. That somebody saying this is my work, and you should pay me this much, is right, is fine. It's completely, who am I even to say we're right or wrong, good or bad, or whatever. That is not the issue. I'm talking, like you also understood that like a museum, like, someone else attaching, especially after they're no more, and, claiming rights and all that over it. Yeah, the point is, yeah, that whole idea. I mean, it is also sometimes what is done with queer trans people, with our bodies, with our emotions, that either this exoticization, ridicule, scorn, or shame, stigma, whichever. But much more than that, this whole thing about uh, you know especially when all these pride month and all come, the whole rainbow capitalism which is happening, which that's why I started calling June the corporate pride month, the corporatized pride month, right? So, and similarly, right? I mean, uh, if we are glad and comfortable, calling ourselves whatever we want to or something, or not, also, that much respect is. We should not be seeking it each time, that that as though we have nothing else to do. But it is so shameful that people reduce themselves to that. They do not want to respect and accept somebody who's different from them, because somewhere fundamentally, again, it is making them uncomfortable, not the people who are different like us, right? And many times we barely have time to negotiate, navigate our lives, and decide when to be open or not, about what and how. That we don't, I mean, yeah, I mean, yes, we keep discussing this point all the time, because why should someone's discomfort with me bother me, actually? But I am supposed to be bothered, because my not being bothered discomforts them first. Yeah, and
Yeah,
yeah, to me, I am also okay with that. I think even that bothers them further. So, what is it about these people, that just look at the way, now the latest beast to deal with is Meta, which directly we are using, to do this today. Okay, and you know, UK and the country, the part of the world that you migrated from, right? Even if there are, I think, so many restrictions will be there, right? Even if there is affirmative. Would you like to, talk a little more about that?
sorry, about which part?
The part where some of this affirmation is very pretentious and partial. Yeah, the queer trans affirmation. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I wanted to circle back the first time that you brought it up about the fact that it's very disconcerting how sometimes issues are highlighted, and but then it's kind of never on the person who is experiencing its terms. It's on the terms of like a wider outsider point of view, and I think that's a very insidious tool that is used against the queer community as well, where everything is placed upon kind of how the individual, the queer individual, is different from the norm. And then it's upon that person, I guess, to represent that and constantly react to how the norm, which I don't know what it really is treating them, and which is very oppositional and very isolating and quite disempowering, because one never feels like we're in control of our own narrative in that way. And it's always, there's always so much conversation, especially in the mainstream media here everywhere right now, about what should what should people do about us, about queer people, about trans people, but it's not up to them. So why is it a debate and a conversation like this? And also, I think what's very disempowering in putting queer people as an opposition to the norm, it centers um, disadvantage and suffering more than our joy and our communal experiences, and the fact that like we connect to something bigger than any one person in the queer community. I think that side is almost made invisible by the discussion, for example, with transgender and trans people like myself. A major way to receive any kind of medical treatment, or in order to be recognized by the state at all, is to constantly talk about the gender dysphoria aspect of this. And that's something that they, non-trans people defined the criteria of, and now apply to trans people, and we have to perform to adhere to, and it keeps changing, and they constantly change the rules, and trans people always have to keep up and keep changing our answers in order to fit that criteria of, am I suffering enough in order to deserve help, in order to deserve recognition? But why is it that we are, measuring suffering rather than measuring joy, measuring gender euphoria, talking to children about, rather than, do you feel like you're in the wrong body? More like, do you feel like you could be even happier in the body that you're in? What's can you move towards, rather than what do you have to move against or away from? These aren't like common questions, but within the community, I feel like that's why it's so important to have other queer people from all walks of life, or generally diverse people, to have these kind of honest conversation with, because that's where we can start to be empowered to even begin talking about not just like what am I struggling with, but what makes me happy, and what is standing in the way of my happiness, and how can we collectively come together and achieve that form of happiness or pleasure that is long lasting, and that will give us enough strength every day in order to help more and more people and regain more and more compassion, and create an actually equitable, sustainable space, rather than one that is constantly disempowered and stripped down, and centering this idea that I as an individual am isolated and I'm suffering, and so I need to get resources for myself in order to be just about okay, in order to join a norm, in order to join a society that doesn't see me as valuable in enough who I am. It's like I have to change all of these things so that I can be normal, so that I can join the capitalist, workforce and the flow of day that in the end is unethical and is never centering human happiness either. So it's such a vicious cycle, I think.
Um, no, superb. I mean, like, very touched by what you said. Right. And I'm glad, otherwise I would have also asked you to share a little more about the healthcare issues. This is fundamentally, it's like, as a neurodivergent person with multiple invisible disabilities, right? Something, I think, again, it's an unfortunately a global term. Reasonable accommodation is used, that is so reductionist and also very ableist, and in a way also, ableist, cishet, all these kind of capitalist try. Oh, okay. Like, as you say, it is again from their viewpoint that, and even if we are not asking them to create any rules for us, any boundaries. In fact, we're asking them not to. We're asking them to shut up and get away if they can't, help us, or only harm or hurt us. And yet they want to keep doing it. Okay. And the thing is that uh, we, despite our best efforts, unfortunately, are supposed to account for their misunderstanding, their limited understanding, their misconception, discomfort. Uh, yeah. So I think that is something that I whether I almost nowadays don't tire of saying, because I think we must keep saying this all the time, irrespective of who hears us or not. And if Meta or Google and all the genocide backers and the genocide enablers, want to continue saying no, saying whatever the majoritarian, ableist, classist, racist, casteist people want to be saying, so be it. We don't care, and I think we won't care. And I mean, what I'm saying is, we won't care to the extent that it hurts us and harms us, right? We have decided to live life on our terms as we are. And then, as you said, our lives need not be and are not about pain always. Yes, we are healing. We may be considering ourselves healed or not. Okay, but it's completely for us to decide. We may declare it, disclose it, or not. Okay, the question is that if all they want to do is pathologize us, or ostracize, or a kind of pity us or something. Sorry, I mean, at least to me nowadays, I'm only amused by it. Okay, is that the only, you're not just straight as in STRAIGHT, but also STRAIT, straight jacketed, so narrow minded in your thinking, your expression. And yeah, I mean, yours is probably a colorless, joyless life. Okay. And yeah, if that's what you want, please do or don't do, and don't even have to bother me. I'm not going to bother you. Okay. Or yeah. So right. Yeah, essentially we need not account for someone's discomfort with us, right? And yeah, I mean, if all they can do is hate, harm, hurt, well, good luck to them, because how long will they keep doing it, right?
Yeah. I mean, destructive behaviors never come, I feel like, from a space of inner security. And so these systems, and exactly what you say, straightness, and other oppressive systems are straitjackets. And like we talked about in our conversation before this, in the activist tradition, it's very important to center this view that to always be reminded that ultimately this doesn't benefit anyone. It's like, of course, in terms of these kind of corrupted human values of power and capital and wealth, there is huge benefit to the oppressor. But in the long term, in terms of what they'll leave behind for the future of humanity, for their own children and for their own selves, every disaster that is being perpetuated by this cycle is only becoming faster, and it's only coming sooner. And so it's it's genuinely not, a destruction of a system that sets certain human lives as not as important, certain elements of the world and the ecosystem as not important. It comes back, and this is something that I appreciate so much in South Asian and Buddhist philosophy, is the understanding that nothing before it was understood in physics that no action comes without an effect, and everything has a cause and a consequence, and we can't, count for all of them, but it's impossible to live in the delusion thinking that somebody can just oppress and take, and that eventually it won't, all the things that they are gaining from it, they won't lose all of it, because we're all on the same tiny planet. So I think that these systems are truly not life affirming. When we're talking about Meta and X and all of these kind of um, social apps, that we see how quickly within a few decades, within our lifetimes, they change their politics, they change what they believe or represent. And in the end, all across the world, people are talking about, even right-wing conservative people are saying that these social media apps are bad for mental health. They don't want to give it to their children, because there is a sense, I think, in all human beings that wants to thrive, that wants to have healthy communication. And even when you're pushed into these delusional beliefs, it still cries out. It's like the whole world is in the closet and it wants to be liberated and it wants to be free. It's just, I think certain factions and larger groups, because of the fear, because of these scare tactics and control, are expressing that scream for liberation and digging into deeper into the hole and saying we have to conserve and we have to double down on what we've been doing for the past hundreds of years on all of these supremacist values. That's going to be the way out, but it's not. And at a certain point, I really hope that, culturally, a wall is hit and you have to turn back and you have to realize that this there's no such thing as individual liberation for a certain small group of people who will, just take a rocket ship to Mars once they've destroyed everything. It's unsustainable. The ecosystem doesn't work like this. Humanity has never worked like this. We only become healthy when we are really acknowledging interdependence and reaching out and creating care and creating pleasure. When you're just feeding yourself on hatred and amassing power every day, I think that ruins lives very quickly. So I still care. I still care that, this group of people who are stuck in this. I hope that they're paying so much attention to queer people and saying all of this stuff, because it's impossible to look away from people who live in the same society as them and say, no, I'm not going to play by the rules. I'm going to center my happiness. I'm going to look after others, and yes, they're like shouting us down and they're trying all of these ways to make us disappear. But if they truly didn't believe that this was something important, then they would pay no attention. I feel like all of this attention is proof that people realize that this, what queer and trans people are doing, and the way that they're involving this into becoming more grounded human beings, is an important process for all of the world, and it recognizes that insecurity in everyone else, that, oh, how come these people are living freely and I, in my kind of beliefs and things, am not. Why do I have to follow these rules? And it's frustrating, but I really call people who are in that space to say, like, there's no reason why you can't also live like this. It takes renouncing certain things that are seen as culturally acceptable or culturally valuable. You have to come down from certain positions of power, but once those things are announced, there is just so much more to life. I genuinely think that, in that way we are lucky that even though there is still so much to be done. I would not walk back the progress that has already been made at any cost.
Yeah. Oh, mm, superb. Very lovely, very meaningful and powerful words, but it takes quite some, someone with an open mind and heart. Of course, I'm sure all of us here who are listening and watching, and, we all queer trans people everywhere are like that. But yeah, the thing about, yeah, they will just destroy and take a starship to somewhere, and hopefully they won't destroy that place, but you never know. Yeah, sometimes I feel that, enough of destroying the earth. At least in some ways it's better that the other planets or universes can't be inhabited so easily, because where are we going to stop? And this reminds me again of something which periodically, but now everything is available on the internet, that in comparison to, before humans appeared on the earth or in the universe, to after, yeah, and of course it's a collective responsibility, how quickly, you know um, whatever you call it, the nature, or we call it G, or, essentially life itself has been sort of destroyed, and yeah, and reduced to, if not ashes, uh, sort of irrevocably damaged. Yeah, so that is tragic, but anyway, yeah, I mean, it's important that you mentioned Buddhism. I was anyway going to come into that. I think briefly you mentioned, but I know you say you're a student of Vajrayana Buddhism. I think there are certain aspects of certain philosophies, teachings, whichever we call it. Yeah, much as from childhood, I've been very inspired and touched and moved by Buddhism, to the extent that, somebody, I think in India, that especially being in the south, in Chennai especially, that we had lots of Sri Lankan Tamils returning. So somebody who came like that very innocently, because in our household, always there would be pictures or small statuettes of the Buddha visible, and they were like, "Oh, are you Buddhist?" We were like, "We've never been asked this question, but why?" But I think for them, unfortunately, the Buddhism that they saw, how, not all Sinhalese Buddhists are like that, but I'm just saying. So, yeah, but anyway, that's not the Buddhism that any of us follow, or yeah, or learn from. But we always, yeah, believe that Buddha is also queer and trans, and yeah, but and that's the whole beauty of it. And this is not wishful thinking, this is not utopia, please, for anybody who's listening or following. If you do not believe that, fine. But yeah, we see, and this very rare thing that you said, renunciation of uh, what we think does not suit us, right? Its renunciation does not mean going off to a forest or a cave and then being. Not that whether that is also good or bad or right or wrong, but renunciation can be so much, right? And so diverse and different, right? So, but what draws you towards Buddhism, if I might ask? Yeah, and what is it that you know you absorb? I know it's a very personal thing, but if you don't mind sharing.
I appreciate that question. Thank you. I encountered Buddhism, of course, also from childhood, growing up in the time when TV played such a big role in upbringing. I was lucky that I was always interested in and had access to kind of Discovery Channel and all of these kind of things, which of course have their own biases, but at least opened me up to the idea of like multiple cultures. And one of my earliest art teachers was quite close to Buddhist teaching as well. So I had kind of a faint idea of it. It was dormant for a lot of my years. I couldn't reconcile my kind of positioning as a queer person with any religious order, especially because I was exposed to a lot of quite fundamental Christian teaching in the way that I was interacting with schooling here. Um, so I think that it was important for me because I was realizing as I was kind of heading out of my teenage years that I was missing a spiritual side to my life, especially because it's what I kept coming back in artistic practice. I always found religious art, even ones that come from like traditions that might I have associated with some kind of pain or trauma, still very evocative, had a lot of emotion that was imparted in quite a direct way. Um, and so I wanted to start to explore a larger kind of palette of that. And I was also really looking towards religious art that centered feminine expression as an empowered thing. And I was struggling, of course, in the West. We haven't encountered religious traditions that are kind of very bold with that. Of course, there are like certain cultures with certain understanding of saints and things like that that have femininity, but it's not really at the forefront of the accepted conversation, I guess. So it took me time to kind of go towards roots of like my own culture and ancient spirituality that existed in the Central Asian region. And of course, it was very much influenced by the different Asian empires that were there, like the Persian Empire. And so yeah, and the Silk Road that kind of passed through a lot of Central Asia meant that there was a lot of cultural exchange going on as well. And that's where I really, understood that there were folk beliefs like shamanism that still exists in my country, um, and how much it also had an influence on, Zoroastrian and Muslim practices, and also even the evolution of Buddhism. It was a very interesting way that Central Asia and kind of early Buddhism interacted and developed into forms of Buddhism that did have a mystical element that was maybe more relatable to the everyday person whose goals were, to receive benefits through devotion right now rather than kind of in that long-term understanding of enlightenment. Um, and I was very lucky to encounter my teacher, Choen Kandro, along that exploration. She is a Vajrayana Buddhist who trained with some of the Tibetan and Mongolian schools. And from there, I understood, not just the historical point of view, but more of the embodied point of view. And right now, I'm, still at the very basic level, but it's very interesting for me to explore these questions like renunciation. We have this idea or stereotype that a renunciate is somebody who has to lose everything, but really it's about gaining. And that's like such an important conversation to start from the point of view of not like, I'm so happy and I have so much pleasure and I have to give it all away in order to have this kind of spiritual suffering and spiritual sacrifice. But actually, right now, maybe, yes, I have access to luxury and things like that. But am I happy? Am I, or am I stuck in cycles of addiction? And if I'm addicted to all kinds of things, all kinds of destructive things, then it's not my pleasure. It's something that's controlling me. And if I can't stop, then I have no space for enunciation, but I also have no space to enjoy anything. If I'm addicted to being stressed, if I'm addicted to self-destruction, negativity towards myself, if I'm addicted to isolation, all of these things are not benefiting my life. So in order to have that space for enunciation, just to be able to say, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm done with that cycle. I want to, give up. You don't have to, give up the things that are genuinely improving your life, but can I give up my self-criticism and dedicate that time towards something that empowers me so I can share that with others? That's just like something that I think is so important and has so many practical applications in day-to-day life. So it's not, the way that I think sometimes Buddhism is presented here as something very mystical, and you close your eyes and you go somewhere else, is also quite funny, because if you look at it, it's really is about coming back and grounding and coming back into what is reality and what are the issues and how can I help the most amount of people, not by being a missionary and forcing them to change their life, but on their own terms. How can I equitably bring the most people into a state of peace? And I think that's also a queer value as well. So of course I see this as not something contradictory, but I'm glad that you also brought up the fact that, in certain areas and geopolitical systems, even Buddhism is not immune to being made into a tool of oppression. I think, there are fundamentalist readings of anything that can be used to harm other life, but yeah, I think that it's not that it does not go with even the most essential teachings of most spiritual traditions. Most spiritual traditions, I think, are there to bring people closer to each other, and it's tragic how much it has been misapplied and how much, yeah, it's been turned into something else by honestly just kind of selfish ruling class powers. I mean, with Christianity, it's such a clear image with the history of this country in particular, of how, a message of a person who was talking out against oppression in the life of Jesus, you can see that. It's turned into a tool of oppression very easily and turned into something to disempower as many people as possible. And yeah, it doesn't make much sense, I guess, but it's very prevalent.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so thankful and glad that you said that, because I was going to say that, none of the saints or the prophets or whatever we call them, your messiahs or whatever, they even claim themselves as messiah, okay, or leader or prophet, okay, whether it is Jesus Christ, the Buddha, Prophet Muhammad, or anybody else. Yeah, they just went about living their lives their way, and which is, as you said, very queer and trans. Of course, hung out with the people who, there was mutual comfort, and it so happened most of the time those people were the ones whom the rest of the world was probably uncomfortable with, right? They say, the sex workers, the people with disabilities, the poor, the children, the and everywhere, right? And for them, I think neither class nor comfort mattered, right? But they never ever built physically or notionally any institution, any did not call it a religion. I'm starting, follow me, of course not. people followed them, how, were with them whenever they choose to, whenever it was possible. But they never again said, why did you not come back to me? Why did you, just, I think, cared about how they were and stuff like that. And we have so many like that, Sufism and all these, yeah. They're mystical but not mysterious. Yeah, there's a fundamental difference between those. And all they did was demystify everything. Yeah, but and of course they were very syncretic in their outlook, in their beliefs, in how they lived their life. Okay, and they make a hash of all this, and above all that, the sad and sometimes outrageous, and as I said, more and more I find dark humor helps. All you can reduce to is claiming, oh, Christ is ours, the Buddha is yours, and oh, they were born in Nepal, they were born here, oh, Japanese Buddhism is the most whatever. Yeah, for example, I mean, there's so many such things, right? Oh, we Catholics are whatever. I mean, just look at, the Pope. If you see them as just a human being, is trying to do something, and then, oh, you can only be a gay priest if you are like this. If you are not that, what on earth? I mean, just stop being so pretentious, okay? Right? I mean, the church and so many of these so-called power seeking, authoritarian religious institutions, yeah, which are nothing about religion or scripture or spirituality or anything being fundamentally humane or even human. Forget humane, being humane seems to be so difficult for them. They are nothing but about, domination, right? There is sexual abuse of children, okay, so much racism and casteism within these religious institutions, and they dare call themselves leaders. I mean, shame them, okay, and they don't want to address that. Yeah, because somewhere, they feel not just guilty, I think they're scared that all the skeletons or whatever is there that they are suppressing and hiding are going to come just tumbling out. And yeah, I mean, if you cannot just see a human in another, or another living being, I mean, all that so-called, titles and what is that, holiness and all is so unholy. It's just downright stupid and silly. And as you say, yeah, the absence of security and comfort within themselves and with themselves. Yeah, and that is why they want to, so the easiest, apart from so many others that they discriminate against, are the queer trans people, right? Abnormal and unnatural, and what even is that, I mean, yeah. I mean, like, oh, okay. To this extent, we will tolerate you. We don't need your tolerance. We've lived with intolerance so much, and we're all the time navigating and negotiating our lives. And yeah, as you said, euphoria, joy, and actually, one of the objectives of these Insta lives, I mean, which just happened along the way, is because, each time brings us joy to have these conversations. People like you also say that, because why is joy become so difficult? Yeah, yeah. I mean, joy is not just about partying and being, what do you say, just that outwardly, hedonistic. I mean, it's okay. People want to be, that's fine. But, there's no point in having that very conditional and short lived joy only for a few people. Someone has to allow us to have that. As you say, gender dysphoria is what they want to see in us, not gender euphoria, which we are showing claiming and having, right? Okay. So, as you say, and they want certificates of, laws and policies, and, so many people again and again, like for in India, okay, repeatedly saying that we self-identification of gender, self-determination of your identity of all kinds is your basic right, and you're entitled to that. And then they want gender dysphoria to be certified. I mean, who is dysphoric here? You know, right? And as if that's not enough, this ridiculous, again, the straight-jacketed psychologists and psychiatrists and, who of them, they will say gender identity disorder. This is the only way we can treat you, you know. Actually, they're mistreating us. Only if we say disorder, we can, address. We or you are not going to be able to address our needs. You can't even handle us, okay? So stop disordering us, okay? And that's the thing, and yeah, I mean, for all you know, maybe one queer trans friend said, non-binary person, you know what, they are uncomfortable with their sexuality. Yeah, they are unable to accept, and somewhere I think they are trying to project on you, and you are not even being bothered about it. And somewhere I think your comfort reflects on them, which again you're not trying to do anything. Yeah, you're not trying to do, and that is what is, which is kind of manifesting as all this whole them justifying that we are disorder. The more I think of it, the more I discuss, and right, the more it gets so just ludicrous. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for, yeah, putting it so succinctly. I agree, and I really feel energized by how you've said it, because it's absolutely true. I mean, it really comes back to what we were talking about with artists kind of being set apart as like these like exceptional individuals,
Yeah.
which disempowers the majority, like the totality of human beings who are all artists in their own right, and who all have, that spark of originality and communion that can be shared. It's same with these issues with spirituality, setting apart the icons and prophets and saying, well, this exceptional individual and we have to 100% follow what they were saying, but also, nobody can be like them, so you have to be ashamed about that. That's such almost all of them said, every person is exactly like me. Every person is a Buddha. Every person, is a child of God or an expression of the divine. So it's not saying that's like change everything about yourself in order to be like, somebody 3,000, 2,000 years ago. Um, that wouldn't work. It's like everyone already within themselves carries something beautifully human, that knows about the value of joy and support, that knows, which is also another, knowledge that is being destroyed and lost. But if you look at communities across the world who are dependent on the natural resources that were available, for example, my ancestors in the nomadic lands would never take more from the land that it could give, because everybody knew that then, when you come to next winter, you would have nothing left, and then you'll starve. So you have to maintain the natural order. You have to accept that you're as much an animal as also a something a little bit different, that has this like ability to have a creative concept that can even help, and collaborate with the natural water to express something beautiful, to express something nonviolent. And with transness and with queerness, it's saying, yeah, that this is some kind of a disorder, saying that this is something to be ashamed of or fight or convert to is also completely ridiculous. And I'm so vastly inspired by the people in our community who are finding examples of transness that was integrated into the various cultures of the world. This knowledge is, as you talked about beautifully as well in the Queer Buddhist Conference, and other peers of ours I have, that this is something that has been forcefully hidden, but there is an example of the fact that like trans and queer people truly embody within themselves this understanding that, because what is gender? It's not this kind of binary separate thing from the rest of the natural human experience. If anything, I feel like a lot of us are talking about gender, but really we're talking about all human characteristics. Because to say that, oh, certain behaviors are to do with gender or to do with femininity or masculinity, and certain other behaviors have nothing to do with gender, we know that's not true, and we know it's all kind of very fluid and very hazy. And so it's, I think, like, taking the matter of gender and turning it into something that is against this culture of disempowerment and turning into a tool of expression and beauty and liberation and joy is so powerful, because it's about taking all of these human and natural characteristics and behaviors and states of mind and feelings like euphoria and feelings even like dysphoria, and bringing all of that towards something that is essentially empowering rather than disempowering. And that's when we were talking about what attracted me with Buddhist art, I don't think I got to the point that I was also seeing this tradition that shared a lot, of course, with the other religions around and other spiritualities around the region of its kind of conception of polytheism, of many deities who are all so different, who all have all of these kind of appearances, and they're taking bits from every version of humanity, every version of nature and animals and abstract concepts and shapes and colors, and all of that, like in it gets expressed in one of these divine forms. And it says this is also a way to achieve enlightenment. This is also a way to achieve um, a divine state. And it's, I think it's exciting to see somewhere where that feeling that gender can very much be part of it and can be taken along to this journey. It's not about shedding it because of original sin or something, but it's a lot of the art, and a lot of the art that the British were so outraged when they encountered this during their colonial years and even tried to destroy or hide, tragically, is like very celebratory of the human body and all of its diversity of sensuality, of sexuality, of asexuality. You can see, examples of all of that. So sometimes, I go into temples or something this, and it truly feels like, this is what the original pride was about. Like, we're all here and we all want liberation, and that's great.
That is so fabulous and so nice to hear. Oh gosh, we there was a spiritual pride march, and right, just we're yeah, actually life, people, everyone was actually queer and trans, you straightened, right? You abnormalized. Maybe that's what we should start saying, so wonderful you also put it this way, because like I keep also turning this whole abnormalcy as head on its head, that especially as an asexual person, oh, sexual attraction, sexual desire, sexual arousal is so normal, you must be. I'm like, yeah, it may be normal to you, it is not normal to me, but I am not saying that your sexualization, leave it on hypersexualization, is abnormal, right? Actually, it's abnormal to me, but I'm not saying it, you are saying it, okay? And that's what I think is troubling you, that I'm not saying it or I'm not fighting or something. Yeah. So actually, you know what, the other thing that you said about uh, the whatever seem to you as spiritual or divine can be in any form or free of form, right? Okay. So it could be the tree or the leaf, or I don't know, I mean, if someone worships some insects, or you don't even have to worship, right? Something you hold precious, something you see as different, or something you want to sort of emulate if you want to, right? I mean, like, for instance, I mean, as kids especially, when you tend to observe little things, and I saw, oh my gosh, being raised in a very humid climate, totally the sea was flowing through part of the city, Chennai. It used to be called Madras at that time. Ants and lizards and cockroaches used to be there. Whatever you do, in the some particular seasons, they'll be there. But the most fascinating, okay, sometimes I really miss that I don't observe ants anymore. Okay, my gosh, how much to learn from them, It's just that whole feeling of what is this ant, yeah? I mean, it can bite you hard, you might want to destroy it, but the ant continues being what the ant is, right? And I think, yeah, you know, um it used to be very strange that in our science or biology textbooks, the ant used to be shown. Obviously, you didn't understand as a child that was a magnified image of an ant, but it was like, ant is not like this. It doesn't have all, because you see it only this much, right? Speck on your, the tip of your nail. The tip of your nail can have some 5 ants, right? The tiniest ones, right? Yeah. But that's the thing, right? It's also the very reductionist way we are taught, literally in black and white. Okay. And this is an ant. Now, how is a child going to believe that this is the ant when all this is not visible, right? And but then you have to say that, see, that's also a graphic representation, but you tell that art, that is the artistic way of representing, but to sort of magnify, right? That's also the way art represents so many things in from our own perception, but sometimes you want to convey some meaning. But instead of saying that, no, this is the ant, and then you're supposed to believe, and this whole thing, then despite having studied science and engineering and technology, and after religion, this whole audacity, the arrogance that what this whole rigid scientists have, right? Oh, we are superior, we know everything, we define, but oh my gosh. And again, that is why, after religion, they use science to, and I mean, medicine is also a branch of science, right? To not just even just pathologizers, to almost nullify our existence, or kind of make it impossible, right? This is the against the order of nature. Now, what and whose nature you're talking about, you will not say. Yeah, this is against the order of your, you know what do you say, illogical nature. I mean, it's stupid that you say this science is about rationality and logic, and you use everything irrational and illogical to deny us our space and existence. And if yet we prevail, because I remember a few years ago, doctor with disability, but I mean, a really, really very sincere, very, very supportive ally of queer trans people told me, Ritash, remember, medical students need to understand this, because, he's also a physician, professor, and so many other things. Yeah. So he said, you know what? Even medical students can be asexual, right? Because they are also humans first, right? So the sooner they hear about this, maybe it will help them. Yeah. And this took me back to what I used to say when I used to go talk with students of social work, and especially, emerging psychologists and stuff. Like, if, yes, nobody can completely heal, there's nothing like trauma won't trigger, won't recur. There may be different kinds of trauma, content and trigger warning to anybody here. Sorry about this, but have to mention it because it's a relevant example. You sort your basic emotions out, otherwise you will not be able to reach out to somebody. Okay, is what I would tell. And then, my gosh, I would not even have to say anything more. And the students would go about, literally sometimes, if not physically fighting, arguing about gender, this, that, discrimination, caste, and all that among themselves, because that is the baggage that they are carrying or living with, the burden, that the so-called classmates, and many of them also become friends, whom they are studying with day in and day out for 2-3 years, are kind of openly and very casually insulting them. And they're like, if we can't, I mean, and many times at home also they are forced to suppress. Okay, now if all these environments are so suppressive and oppressive, how are they going to be able to uh, offer anything to anyone, right? And so I remember that their faculty members, they were like, we're so glad we called you, and you came there without too much of an agenda. Because I said, see, I have come with these objectives, but let us discuss what you want to. This is not going to be your typical graded class or something like that. And my gosh, these children, students, not teenagers exactly, adolescents, they would just let loose, and somewhere they would feel healed, even if it was just about half an hour, 45 minutes. It would, like, if the close of that session was not announced, they would have continued, and then you would see. And I think, I know we've digressed again, sorry about that, but it's so necessary for us, I think, to keep challenging the norm, as you said. What is as it is or as it should be is always fluid, right? Yeah. And I think, yeah, so it's almost over an hour and a half. If I did not see the time, I think, or I know it's way almost evening for you. So yeah, we can soon end this conversation, but any specific other points you want to mention? Don't.
I
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the last example you brought up about the scientific field, and also I didn't know, yeah, about your work of interacting with these students. It sounds like, it would have been really stimulating to be there, because yeah, it's true. I mean, we don't just need more queer scientists who will study, the things that we need to be talked about, but also like the whole premise, the whole like kind of ways that these systems operate need to be queered and need to be changed, like you're saying. I think that's such a great thing to remind myself of, because of course it's just we have a lot of these ideas of like, oh, the first queer, person within the government in this country, or the first scientist or astronaut within this country. And it's a mixed feeling, because it's like, of course, I want to see our siblings and all kinds of people from the communities succeed, but at the same time, within inherently kind of corrupt systems, I know how that story, we have the experience of previous generations, how that story goes. So it's like the hope is that, like, as the point of view that we have to share is seen as more and more valuable, rather than something to be studied, but maybe something to be learned from and be taken as an example and followed. um, that's that can be applied on larger scales, so that people, don't just have to conform to a new institution, but the institution learns to adapt and learn from them, and maybe it even stops being an institution. It starts being something completely different. um yeah, but overall, I'm really glad we had this conversation. I think a lot of these ideas, are sometimes in my head, and I don't know how to share them, and or I want to ask certain questions, but I don't know how to or who to ask. And I I've learned a lot from being able to hear what you have to say, and also how we've shared, and we've touched on truly so many topics. So I hope we get to do this again. But I'm really grateful for this opportunity today. It was like a magical experience, and you're very generous with your time, very kind to hold this space. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm also very, very delighted to hear that you enjoyed, and each conversation helps us grow and hold together. And also, yeah, I mean, also request and message to people who are here now or later. Yeah, we, despite everything, will continue to be ourselves. And I'm and many of us here in Rang and the associated uh, organizations, groups, yeah, whatever, basically our community, we have multiple experiences, skills, whichever. Like, I'm also a multilingual peer counselor for the community. And I think being us is not easy in this current world. Yeah, but I think if we support and reach out, you can DM us, or I think email us also. Maybe slow, but we will surely answer whatever we can. And that's the also idea of doing these conversations, is that yes, there are some very again, very respectable leaders of the community everywhere, but they also have their space and time. The idea is to have many more people emerge with their thoughts and emotions and ideas and abilities. And so, like, you very importantly said now, that yes, queer trans people are there everywhere, yeah? So, and yeah, so just we hold on and try to be ourselves. I'm reiterating this because, just as a parting thing, somebody once told me, asked me, in my counseling sessions, like, how can you be more trans? Am I gay enough? Or I want to be like you because you are this and that. I'm like, yeah, but you know what? Uh, I, you may think you're complimenting me, yes, but I'm not going to get carried away by this, because actually, in some ways, it's a responsibility and a burden for me. But more importantly, try to be yourself, because it will become difficult for you. Otherwise, you will think this is the benchmark or this is the standard, and do you want to be like that? Do you want to stress yourself more? Right? If you use that, I know stress is an overused word, or it's a very stressed word or a stressful word. But yeah, I think jokes apart. I think yeah. Hopefully, yes, we are going to continue spreading queer and trans joy, and then find our euphoria. Okay, and thank you again to everybody. Rainbow salutes. We say Satrangi Salam in some of the languages in South Asia. Okay, thank you so much. All the best, and we will stay connected. And of course, I'll save this live session, and we will share it with you. Yeah, much love and strength, and all the best to you. Yeah, and so for dwelling on the possible addictions, because people realize that it's not just about the narcotic substance abuse. Digital addiction is so much and so harmful. Please, also, yeah, remember that. Bye bye.
Thank
Take care.
you. Bye. You too. Thank you very
Bye.
much.
You too. Yeah, bye. Lovely.